Thank you, Professor Sam Vaknin, for coming to the show, former professor. And also, I would like to state off the bat that your videos were interesting in me understanding the human nature. I like to understand humans, and you brought this perspective of narcissists, how to understand them, what are the how to figure them out, and all of that. And I would like to start with the question: what is a narcissism? What is narcissism? If you can answer me that.
Narcissism is first of all, thank you for having me. We are the men in black, it seems, today.
Yes, we are.
Yeah. So narcissism is a very crucial phase in the personal development of the child. Children use narcissism, and especially the grandiosity element in narcissism, to explore the world. Because when you are 18 months old, when you are 2 years old, to let go of mommy and to explore the universe, you need to be seriously delusional, seriously grandiose. So children go through a phase of narcissism early on, around the age of 2 to 3. And there were various thinkers, starting with Freud and Jung, and way into the 60s and 70s, Heinz Kohut and Kernberg and many others, and they describe narcissism as a crucial component of the regulation of a sense of self-worth. In other words, a crucial component in self-esteem, self-confidence, and the ability to take on the world and to secure favorable outcomes, something known as self-efficacy. So we are all narcissists in this sense. We all have healthy narcissism. However, when you remain stuck at age 2, when you don't grow up emotionally, when there's no parallel development, parallel emotional development, when, for example, you don't transition towards other people, but you remain stuck within yourself, then we talk about pathological narcissism, also known as secondary narcissism. And pathological narcissism includes various components. First of all, a lack of empathy, inability to perceive other people as separate from you, their own needs, three-dimensional. The second thing is a tendency to exploit people or abuse them in order to exploit them. There is also an issue of negative affectivity. In other words, no access to positive emotions, only to negative emotions. There is an issue of inability to tell the external world from the internal world. So in this sense, narcissists are a bit psychotic. They confuse external objects with internal objects. So a narcissist, for example, wouldn't regard you as separate from him. He would regard you as a function or an extension or an introject, an internal object. And he would interact with you as if you were a part of his mind. And so on and so forth. Narcissism is a form of extreme arrested development. It's extreme immaturity. Think of narcissists as toddlers. That would help you.
But okay, so let's start with being the toddler or being the young child and being abused by the parents and all of that. Okay, so basically what happens are, for example, the environment or the parents attack this young child and his feelings are suppressed, and because of it, because his feelings, he tries to survive and therefore his feelings are suppressed, and because of it he starts to be a narcissist because of it. Is it like that? Does it work like that?
In some cases it's like that. Abuse is any situation, parental abuse is any situation where the parents would not allow the child to separate from them and to become an individual. Now, this can be done, for example, via sexual abuse. It can be done via physical abuse. When you beat up the child or when you molest the child sexually, you are breaching the child's emerging boundaries. You're not allowing the child to have a firewall, a protection. The child becomes enmeshed with you, merged with you, fused with you as a parent. So these are the classical forms of abuse: verbal abuse, psychological abuse, etc., etc. They don't recognize the child's separateness, and they treat the child, they objectify the child, they treat the child as an object. But there are many other forms of abuse which are not recognized as abuse, actually. especially with Jewish mothers, and smothering the child, spoiling the child, pampering, idolizing, pedestalizing the child. These are forms of abuse because you're not allowing the child to go out into the world, to get in touch with reality, and to learn the lessons of mistakes and misbehaviors. You're overprotective. And you're also broadcasting to the child that he can do no wrong, that he is infallible, that he is godlike, that he is perfect and superior to other children. These messages are abusive because they don't allow personal growth and development. Similarly, if you use the child as an instrument, instrumentalize the child. For example, you have, as a parent, as a mother, as a father, you have an unfulfilled dream, and you force the child to realize your dream. That's a form of abuse. If you parentify the child, if you become the child as a parent, you become the child, and the child becomes your parent. So you force the child to mother you or to father you. You create alliances, a coalition with the child against your spouse. You treat the child as your intimate partner. These are all forms of adultifying and parentifying, and they're also abusive. It is, in short, it is very, very easy to abuse your children. It is very, very difficult to be what Winnicott called a good enough mother or a good enough parent. And vast majority of parents fail. That's the truth. They fail. They're not good parents.
We talked about good enough parents, and we talked about giving a lot of attention to the kids. But is giving less attention to the kids can cause any form of narcissism? Because logically, I think not, but how do you see it? Because it's some form of abuse as well.
Yes, Andre Green in 1978 coined the phrase dead mother. A dead mother is not a physically dead mother. It's a mother who is emotionally absent, depressive, narcissistic, self-centered, selfish, or absent in the sense that she's out a lot. So here's the problem with parenting. You need to find the thin line, the perfect equilibrium, the balance between overbearing and being absent.
Yes.
Between encouraging the child to separate and protecting the child, providing the child with a secure base, with a safe environment. Very few parents find this balance. Now, children, when they get hurt, when they get seriously hurt, when the abuse is extreme, when the child is not allowed to develop boundaries and to separate and become an individual, children begin to grieve. They develop a grief response, and they grieve what they could have become. They develop a lot of anger. There's a reservoir of anger which they cannot direct at the parent because it's not legitimate. So children then develop a false self. A false self is an imaginary friend, and the false self is everything the child is not. The false self is omnipotent, all-powerful. The false self is omniscient, all-knowing. The false self is perfect and brilliant. In short, the false self is a divinity. It's a god, it's a private god. And the whole thing becomes a private religion. Narcissism, pathological narcissism, is a private religion where the child is both God and a worshiper.
Wait a second.
Or, is that what you mean?
Yeah, that's perfect. And you talked about the God, like the narcissists being gods, because in a religion, you're always can find a way to convince yourself of anything that you do, the good and the bad. And therefore, let's talk about it in narcissism. Do they convince themselves in everything that they do? Is there a mechanism for it that they use in themselves for it?
Narcissists, like many other people, they have defense mechanisms. Defense mechanisms are psychological processes which falsify reality or reframe reality in a way that would make you feel comfortable. It's known as egosyntony, would make you feel egosyntonic. So, of course, narcissists make use of this, but ironically, much less than other people. And the reason is this: the false self becomes the narcissist. Gradually, the child disappears completely. I compare it to human sacrifice. This new God, the false self, is a very demanding God. It's a Molech, yes? It's a Moloch. So it demands human sacrifice. And then the child sacrifices his true self. And there's nobody left except the false self. The narcissist merges with the false self, becomes the false self. And so all that is left is a piece of fiction, a concoction, a narrative, a storyline, the false self. And the false self is godlike. It has God's attributes. Exactly as we wouldn't think that God second guesses his own actions, or that God has self-doubt, or that God goes to therapy. We wouldn't assume that a narcissist would do this, because in the narcissist's eyes, he is a kind of deity. He is a kind of divinity. He is infallible. Everything he does is for the good and for the better. You even have communal narcissists. These are narcissists who really do good. They are charitable, they're altruistic, they help people, they are in the helping professions, medical doctors, therapists, activists, social activists. There are studies, including, by the way, a major study in Israel by Gabai and her partners, 4 studies actually in Israel, that demonstrate that victimhood is a narcissistic construct. So many narcissists use their victimhood as a form of grandiosity, and they become social activists, and they leverage their victimhood to feel unique and special and godlike. There's no end to the guises and disguises and permutations of narcissism. There are narcissists who are proud that they are the world's biggest losers. They are the world's unique failures. A narcissist would go around and say, my company was the biggest bankruptcy in Israel ever, and I'm proud of it. You know, grandiosity is about being special, for better, but also for worse.
You've talked about it in other interviews that you did about we as human beings, in order to understand ourselves, we need to experience the world. And that means, like in the Navy SEALs, in order for you to be in the Navy SEALs, you need to go for hard training and all of that to show that you are made of what they need. And therefore, you understand yourself. Can narcissists do it and somehow go to the real them that was suppressed when they were children and understand themselves really? Or you cannot do it and you're only left with this godlike figure that is just not the real you. That meant
the child who became a narcissist as an adult found reality unacceptable and intolerable, especially the parental environment. So the core of narcissism is impaired reality testing, suspension of reality, rejection of reality. Cleckley, who was the father of the study of psychopathy, wrote that psychopaths and narcissists reject life. And that's very true. So a narcissist would go to great lengths to falsify reality through cognitive distortions, for example, grandiosity. He would create this inflated self-image, which is essentially a fantasy defense gone awry. And then he would reframe reality, he would filter out information, he would falsify, and he would confabulate. He would invent stories about himself, about others, which later he would believe in. All this in order to maintain himself inside a solipsistic, utterly isolated bubble. It's a bubble existence. That's why Kernberg and other scholars, myself included, no comparison, we believe that narcissism is one step removed from psychosis. They are no longer with us. They're floating in the clouds. They can't judge reality properly. Ironically, narcissists gaslight themselves.
Oh, okay.
They gaslight themselves because they lie to themselves about reality, and they tend constantly to falsify.
But to what length it goes, because I think that each human somehow lies about the reality or reality as we see it. So if you can go in more into depth on it, I would appreciate that.
People reframe reality and to some extent falsify it via psychological defense mechanism. And the idea is not to feel too uncomfortable about who you are and what you do. And this state is known as egosyntony. So you're trying to avoid ego dystony in order to attain a state of egosyntony. In other words, to avoid discomfort, to avoid extreme, harsh, life-threatening inner criticism, and so on. So yes, you're right that everyone has a view of reality that doesn't exactly match reality 100%, shall we say, gently. Not so with the narcissist. The narcissist rejects reality in its totality and subjects it to a single organizing principle, which is the fantastic false self. Now, the false self is called false self because it's false. So, whereas normal people, healthy people, whatever that means, by the way, would falsify reality 10% of the time, and only in special occasions and special circumstances where they feel uncomfortable with who they are and what they've done. A narcissist would falsify reality 100% of the time, simply 100% of the time, in order to buttress and uphold an image of himself that has nothing to do with reality, actually. And then this raises a question about criminal responsibility. And in at least one case in the United Kingdom, it was a teenager who murdered his parents. In at least one case, narcissistic personality disorder had been recognized as an insanity defense. And that may be a growing trend. So narcissists are insane, in my view, clinically insane.
You yourself are a narcissist, and when I saw that fact, I was mind-blown because you're talking about it. And okay, it's understandable. Like if you have this quote-unquote problem, you want to deal with it and want to learn about it and all of that. But how do you control this horse that is so wild? How can you do it yourself? That's so interesting. And I know you have high IQ. You said like in some interview that your IQ was measured like when you was a kid or something. You can say it later, about 185 IQ or something along those lines. So if you can go into length on it, I will appreciate it.
That's precisely the solution I found. Solution I found is imposing my intellect, my intelligence, as a barrier or a constraint on the insanity of narcissism. Is it working? Some of the time. Is it working all the time? No. So every narcissist uses his or her resources. We have, for example, somatic narcissists. They use their body. They use their bodies in order to obtain narcissistic supply. Now, narcissistic supply is the input from other people that helps the narcissist regulate his sense of self-worth. So the narcissist maintains his inflated and fantastic self-image by coaxing and sometimes coercing other people to give him the kind of input that would support his view of himself. So if I'm a genius, or I consider myself to be a genius, I would push you and others to tell me that I am a genius.
You're great and smart.
You're great, you're amazing, what an intellect.
Yes.
Since they're Rambam, this, that. So it's, and this is the narcissistic supply that I need in order to maintain my fantastic view of myself. But every narcissist uses what he has. So if you have a nice body, you develop it, you evolve it, you become a bodybuilder, an athlete, and then you engage in sexual conquest. That's your narcissistic supply. That's how you maintain your inflated self-image or self-view. If you have 185, 190, most recent test, IQ, then you're going to use this. This would be your resource. It never works all the time. It's not a path to healing. It's a path to self-restraint and self-control, which is very minimal, intermittent, and very often fails. So narcissists have, I would say 70% of the time, moments of insanity, self-destructive and self-defeating acts, huge damage to others. They hurt other people in a variety of ways all the time. And then they have these lucid moments like in dementia, They have these lucid moments where they control themselves, they can verbalize, they can intellectualize, they sound normal, they sound convincing, even charming, and so on and so forth. It's a facade, it's a mask, and it never holds.
But can you control it though, this facade?
I can put it on for a while, but sooner or later, the real me, the false self will emerge. False self will take over.
Understood.
It's a part of the false self. These masks are part of the false self. The masks are what we call in psychology sublimation. Sublimation is converting urges and drives which are socially unacceptable to activities and speech acts which are socially acceptable and commendable. So from being condemned to being commended. If I were to act on my impulses, narcissistic impulses, I would have been socially condemned, or even worse. So I sublimate them. I convert them into socially acceptable behaviors. But this is a process that consumes a lot of energy. And it's a process of self-denial. So you have to deny who you truly are, or who you feel that you truly are,
yeah.
the false self. And so sooner or later, there's an internal rebellion. There's a defiant reaction, very antisocial. So that's why many scholars conflate narcissism with psychopathy in the form of malignant narcissism. So at some point, the narcissist rebels, the facade cracks, and the true beast emerges.
So you just said the true beast, and Machiavelli talks about the beast and all of that, and we can talk about the term Machiavellianism and link it also to psychopathy, as you said, and also to narcissism. If you can explain the links between those three terms, you can.
Yeah, it's an idea that is now being further developed. It's called the Dark Triad. The Dark Triad, and it's part of what is known as dark personalities. So the Dark Triad includes subclinical psychopathy, traits and behaviors that cannot be diagnosed as psychopathy, although they are typically psychopathic. Subclinical narcissism, traits, behaviors, fantasy defenses that are narcissistic, but do not amount to a diagnosis of narcissistic personality disorder. So these are known as subclinical conditions, coupled with a tendency to manipulate, which is known as Machiavellian. The tendency to manipulate in a variety of techniques, including gaslighting and other ways, and so on and so forth. If you put the three together, you get a dark triad. If you add to this sadism, the wish to inflict pain on others, and gratification from doing so, then you have the dark tetrad personality. And recently, I suggested the dark pentagram personality.
Okay.
I added to the mix borderline. So then we cover essentially all cluster B personality disorders. Dark personalities are much more common than diagnosis of cluster B personality disorders. Anywhere between 10 and 15% of the population have dark personalities.
Wow.
We don't know. We are not quite sure, but it should be between 10 and 15%. And dark personalities are very similar to another construct, another idea proposed by Len Sperry. Sperry said that we should distinguish between disorder and style. So he said you could have a narcissistic personality disorder, or you can have a narcissistic style. And Theodore Millon, one of the giants of the field, accepted this. And so narcissistic style is basically being an a-hole, as a jerk, essentially. But if you take it to extreme, and if you're unable to perceive other people as separate from you, and if you treat them as objects, and if you dehumanize them, and if you exploit them, then it becomes a disorder. All in all, I have huge reservations about the entire field. I'll tell you why, for two reasons.
Okay.
Number one, I think many of these so-called disorders are actually not clinical entities, but social judgments. We call this culture-bound syndromes. A psychopath is someone who rejects the rules and laws and mores of society. He is defiant, he's contumacious, he hates authority, he is reckless. It's all bad. Of course it's bad in the eyes of society. And many of these guys end up in prison. But is it a mental health issue? I don't think so at all. It may be a character, a specific character, coupled with a specific temperament, if you're impulsive, it may be a predilection, it may be the outcome of some upbringing, it may be many things, but it's not a mental health disease. Similarly, narcissists, there's a very thin line between being a jerk or an a-hole and being a narcissist. It is so thin that sometimes it's invisible. So yeah, these people are obnoxious, they're not nice, but do they have a mental illness? The only thing that militates against this view is that narcissists have impaired reality testing, so they are a bit psychotic. So maybe they do have a mental illness. In borderline, you have emotional dysregulation. So that's a real clinical thing. But in psychopathy, there's nothing clinical. If you read the diagnostic criteria for antisocial personality disorder, they are all about functioning in society and behavior. Nothing about the internal world of the psychopath. The second reservation I have is that every narcissist becomes psychopathic, every psychopath becomes narcissistic, every borderline has narcissistic moments, every borderline becomes a secondary psychopath when she's rejected, abandoned, or humiliated, etc., etc. In short, I think all these distinctions are artificial. I think there is a single personality disorder, and everyone with a personality disorder transitions between these phases. Sometimes he's paranoid, sometimes he's schizoid, a loner, sometimes he's a narcissist, sometimes he's a psychopath, sometimes he's a borderline. We transition. When you have a personality disorder, you are all the above and sometimes none of the above. It is wrong. It is wrong to demarcate them. It's wrong to put them in different boxes. And that's why we have the phenomena of comorbidity, where the same person is diagnosed with 7 personality disorders, and a mood disorder, and an anxiety disorder, and a substance abuse disorder. This is ridiculous.
But that actually makes sense because you're not the real you. So you don't know what you are really. And there is this easy line crossing that you intertwine between those disorders. And that's very logical the way you say it. And we didn't really talk about the fact that about the narcissist. Can he be born a narcissist? Is that a thing? Because we understood that it can be made and all of that, but can he be born?
Boredom is more a trait of psychopaths. Mm-hmm. Boredom is a very low. Psychopaths have very low boredom threshold. They react very badly to boredom. They begin to act out defiantly. They do reckless things. They go crazy. Borderlines also have a low boredom threshold. So borderlines tend to react to boredom with drama. They create drama. The psychopath acts criminally and antisocially when he is exposed to boredom. The borderline creates drama. Narcissists don't get bored. Narcissists don't get bored because they anyhow inhabit a fantastic space. And in this fantastic space, there's constant storytelling. It's a narrative generating space. So the narcissist inhabits a movie. The narcissist perceives his life as a movie or a theater production, and it's never boring because he's the director, the producer, the scriptwriter, and the star actor, actually the only actor.
He's the hero.
So he's the hero, he's never the zero. A borderline can go from zero to hero. She has extreme phases of self-devaluation. She can experience guilt and shame. She's overwhelmed by emotions. Narcissist has none of these. A narcissist is a figment, a fictitious character, and he perceives his life as unreal. That's why narcissists are shocked when they are called to account, when they have to serve time in prison or pay a fine or be shamed publicly. They're shocked because they don't feel they have done anything. They are divorced from themselves. They don't take ownership. They don't feel responsible and so on because they're one step removed. They're like constant observers, eternal tourists.
So basically, from what I understood from you, a narcissist can only be made a narcissist by the environment that is in. It cannot be born a narcissist.
Yeah. this ties to the previous question, believe it or not. Boredom is a dissociative response. It's a form of dissociation. And narcissists, borderlines especially, but also narcissists suffer from dissociation. Dissociation has several forms. One, the most famous of which is known as amnesia. It's forgetting things. The second form is known as depersonalization, when you don't feel that you're a real person, but you're a character in a comic, in a Marvel comic, you know. The third form is derealization, when you feel that everything that's happening to you is not real. You're inside some movie, you know. Okay, so borderlines have all three, and narcissists have all three to a lesser extent, much less intense, but they do. I'm telling you this because dissociation is caused by abuse. Dissociation as a lifelong response is caused by early childhood abuse. So there is no development of cluster B personality disorders without childhood abuse. However, in the case of borderline, we found conclusive proof of brain abnormalities. We also are able to easily prove some hereditary genetic component. For example, if someone close in your family has borderline personality disorder, you are 5 times more likely to have borderline personality disorder.
Wow.
So there's a genetic component. It's even worse in psychopathy or antisocial personality disorder, where the structural and functional abnormalities in the brain are massive. Not only in the brain. For example, psychopaths have different skin conductance. Psychopaths sweat a lot less. Psychopaths do not react to startling events or fearful events. The amygdala is atrophied, reacts much less. So it would seem that what we call psychopaths is a brain abnormality. What we call borderline personality disorder is a mixture between brain abnormality, hereditary component, and childhood abuse. And what we call narcissism is probably strictly childhood abuse, because we have failed. We have failed hitherto to find any, or rigorously find any brain abnormalities in narcissists.
So, because the environment like that shapes you and your feelings are being suppressed, can narcissists really love? What is love for them?
The feelings are not suppressed. The feelings are attached to negative outcomes. So the child learns to associate loving, and being loved with pain, with rejection, with absence, with with objectification. So the child learns that love is a bad thing because you feel bad when you love and you feel bad when you're loved. So why go there? So the child learns to deny himself access to positive emotions and preserve negative emotions, because negative emotions are efficacious. If you're angry, you modify people's behaviors around you. If you're envious, it can become a motivation to do better or to destroy the object of your envy. So these are self-efficacious emotions. In other words, they help the child to function. But positive emotions, whenever the child endeavored, whenever he tried to love, to be affectionate, to be compassionate, to be empathic, he was punished. So he learned to associate positive emotions with negative outcomes. And that's the end of it, lifelong.
So
he never tries again. Also, excuse me for interrupting. Another thing is that these children develop what we call insecure attachment styles. So they can't attach. They're afraid to attach. So they have a fearful attachment style, or they have a dismissive attachment style, which is more psychopathic, or or anxious attachment style. They feel anxiety when they get attached because they catastrophize. They anticipate catastrophic consequences. I'm going to be abandoned. I'm going to be cheated on. I'm going to be rejected. This is more common in borderline, actually.
So basically, in a relationship, if we go there, how to, first of all, okay, there is a narcissist and there is a woman, for example, they are in a relationship. What does he try to do meanwhile he's in a relationship? What he first tries to gain if he cannot really attach?
The narcissist, as I said before, narcissism is a fantasy defense, gone out of control. So the narcissist interacts with other people, not only a woman, if he's heterosexual, or a man if he's homosexual, whatever.
Yes.
The narcissist reacts to other people by instantly generating a fantasy space. It's called shared fantasy. He instantly generates a fantasy, and then he incorporates these other people in the fantasy. And they have a role in the fantasy which is very similar to the role of an actor in a movie. And they should conform to the role in the fantasy. And when they don't, he devalues them and he discards them. He becomes very abusive. So the separate existence of any other person in the narcissist's life is denied. And instead, the narcissist superimposes a script on people in his life. And they should fulfill the script. And the aim of the script is to support, uphold the narcissist inflated, fantastic self-image, aka the false self. Now, a woman in this particular case should provide with the narcissist with four things. She should provide him with sex, services, sadistic or narcissistic supply. I call them the four S's. Sex, services, sadistic or narcissistic supply, and safety. So she provides him with two of the four. She is his intimate partner. These four, if you take them together, they convince the narcissist that his false self is not false. Because if the woman has sex with him, he is irresistible. If the woman gives him services, he is superior. If the woman gives him supply, he is a genius or whatever. And if the woman provides him with safety, he has a mother figure who finally does not abuse him and provides him with a secure base and unconditional love. So whichever way you look at it, it's all fantasy, because adult relationships are not like that. In adult relationship, you see the other person as they are. You don't idealize them. You don't convert your intimate partner into a mother. You don't force her to provide you with supply, to tell you how great you are, how amazing you are. You don't do these things. This is a bit coercive, and it's crazy also, because gradually you're forcing your intimate partner to detach from reality the way you do. She becomes totally immersed in the fantasy, and then you have a cult. Narcissists create cults. The cult could be your intimate partner. The cult could be your family, including your children. The cult could be your workplace. So
she also loses touch with reality as well.
Yes, she becomes a member of a cult. Exactly.
So
indoctrinated.
Okay, we'll go back to relationships right now, but I want to ask this question then about leaders. Then leaders, in my opinion, and also Hollywood actors, I would like to think that they have a higher degree of narcissism more than the average person. And if you can go into depth about those leaders and what role those narcissism play in their actions, if you can go and explain it, I would like to.
We have no studies that support this widespread belief that politicians are more narcissistic than any other group of population, any other cohort, any other population. However, they are likely to have higher or more robust and resilient, healthy narcissism. In other words, their self-confidence is likely to be much higher. Their self-esteem is likely to be much higher. And so their sense of self-worth is likely to be regulated from the inside. They would not need other people in order to feel confident and assured of themselves. This assuredness, this, I know who I am and I know where I'm going and you should follow me. This is what people confuse with narcissism or with pathological narcissism. But it's actually healthy narcissism. However, of course you have politicians who are narcissists. And what these politicians will try to do, they will try to impose a fantasy on the electorate, on the people. They will try to use their nations, their people, as a partner in a fantasy. So they would allocate to the people to the voters, to the nation. They would allocate a role, a script, and the nation or the voters or the party, or they should follow the script in order to buttress the leader's fantasy. Now, in very extreme cases, you have Adolf Hitler, and in less extreme cases, you have Viktor Orban, or perhaps perish the thought, Netanyahu. Yeah. So, narcissistic leaders, how do you tell the difference between self-assured, highly self-confident, and maybe a bit narcissistic leaders? How do you tell the difference between these kind of leaders and a narcissist who is a leader? The narcissist who is a leader is no longer embedded in reality fully. He pursues a vision which is fantastic, unrealistic, unlikely to be materialized or actualized, and he forces his nation to conform to the fantasy, and he punishes people who don't conform to the fantasy. These are the hallmarks of a leader who has pathological, sick, malignant narcissism.
So, with those examples in hand, can we say that the narcissist or this leader that is cares about the people, or he doesn't really care about the people? Because I would say that, for example, and it's a different kind of example in a relationship, the narcissist tries to all the time understand and analyze what the other does, and like that being selective and see every move and use it for his advantage later on. So do they care or do they not?
No, narcissists don't care about, they're incapable of caring. They're incapable of positive emotions. As I said before, they have no access to positive emotions. He cares about controlling the people. He cares about forcing the people to conform to his fantasy. He cares about realizing the vision embedded in the fantasy. He cares about the adulation and admiration of the people. He cares about exterminating or eliminating his rivals and adversaries and enemies. And all leaders who are narcissists are also paranoid. He cares about many things. He cares about manipulating the people to conform to his fantasy. So, and some leaders who are narcissists pretend to be communal narcissists. So they would elevate caring for the people, and this would become their grandiosity. They would say, I feel superior because I care for the people. Other politicians don't. I really care. I'm unique. I'm special. In the whole history of my nation, I'm the most caring politician ever, and so on. So they would take caring, which is a pure, beautiful emotion, and they would convert it into a cognitive distortion, a lie, a pretension, a fake, a faking, a forging of behavior. And then this would become their grandiosity. So you have social activists, and you have people like Mother Teresa, who did exactly this. Their locus of grandiosity was, I'm charitable, I'm altruistic, I'm helping people, I'm loving people, I'm supporting people, I'm a victim, and so I'm helping victims, and so on. You have whole victimhood movements, online and offline, centered around a fantasy of victimhood with a grandiosity of caring and support and so on.
Just to gain power over them.
Which essentially is about, yes, but it's less about power. Psychopaths are interested in power. Psychopaths are power hungry. Narcissists are not. They don't care about power. They don't care about money. They don't care about sex. They care about narcissistic supply.
Mm-hmm.
So anything that gets them narcissistic supply, anything that supports the fantasy, they would care about it. But they don't care about the thing itself. They care about what the thing can do for them. Okay. So they don't care about power, but they care about the fact that if they have power, it's easier to realize the fantasy. And the supply will keep coming. They're junkies. Simply junkies.
Okay, so if we'll go back to the relationships, then we'll go to the example again of this man who is a narcissist and a woman who is not. How can she control the supply of his? And is that the way to make this relationship so-called healthier?
A relationship with a narcissist can never be healthy. It's based on fantasy. Nothing based on fantasy is healthy by definition. Fantasy is a defense mechanism. It can never be healthy. It can be manageable. So if you're astute, you're sharp and cunning, smart cookie, then you would know how to manipulate the narcissist. Narcissists are very easy to manipulate. They're gullible. They are fantasy prone. You give them a little supply, they'll do anything. They're junkies, as I said.
Yeah.
Think of it as a junkie. So you give the narcissist his drug of choice, which is narcissistic supply. He will do anything for you. You can literally handle the narcissist perfectly. But then you have to sacrifice your own values and your own integrity and your own honesty and your own everything. In effect, the narcissist forces you to vanish, to disappear, and to reappear as a dark personality. And this is why I keep saying that narcissism or pathological narcissism is contagious. It's infectious. Even if you start off as a very strong personality with integrity and values and beliefs, and by the time you've spent a period of time with a narcissist, you become a dark personality. The only way to survive with a narcissist is to become Machiavellian, manipulative, dishonest. Otherwise, you just walk away. If you're honest with yourself, you walk away. If you stay with a narcissist, you are going down the rabbit hole.
The thing is with narcissists, that's at least what you said in one of your lectures, or I think documentary you've said it, that they do everything in their power to seem likable in the start and do everything that you love, for example. So if you love the color red, then they would love the color red. And then they will turn their mask off, and they would be their full self. So what is there types that are attracted to those narcissists? Is there a certain type?
These are two questions, actually. But let's start with the first one. The narcissist's main weapon is not the fact that he can emulate you, that he can imitate you. That's not his main weapon. The main weapon the narcissist has, he idealizes you. During the love bombing and the grooming phases, the narcissist tells you that you are perfect, amazing, unprecedented, unique, handsome, super intelligent, and he never felt with anyone else the way he feels with you. So he idealizes you. And then he reflects, he shows you this idealized image, and you fall in love with your idealized image. When you talk to victims of narcissists, they say, I loved the way he loved me. Or I loved to see myself through his eyes, through his gaze, I call it the hall of mirrors. The narcissist idealizes you and then introduces you to a hall of mirrors where you see yourself reflected 1,000 times. Who can resist this? This is self-love in the extreme. And the second technique the narcissist uses, he offers you to be your mother. He tells you, listen, you're ideal, you're perfect, you're flawless. There's nothing ever wrong with you. You have no shortcomings and no frailties. You're almost God, you're almost divine. So I'm going to love you unconditionally because no conditions are needed. You're perfect. Who loves unconditionally? Mother does. Mother loves her baby unconditionally. So the narcissist regresses you to infancy, renders you a child, and then loves you unconditionally the way a mother does. And these two together, the ability to self-love your idealized image and the motherhood which the narcissist offers to you, this is an irresistible proposition because it's like a second childhood. Like a second childhood. It's an oceanic feeling of being safe and secure and held and contained and loved like nothing before, like at no time before. And many victims complain that what they've had with the narcissist, they're never going to have again. They're nostalgic. They're nostalgic. They endured the most extreme abuse and they keep coming. They're nostalgic. Now, borderlines and codependence are the two main types who are attracted to narcissists. I want to make something clear. The narcissist is promiscuous, he's indiscriminate. The narcissist goes for anyone who offers him narcissistic supply. End of story. Narcissists have no type. If you offer supply, if you are willing to participate in the fantasy, if you are willing to adopt your script and follow it, you're an intimate partner, potential intimate partner. End of story. Never mind what you are. You can be a psychopath. Many narcissists team up with psychopaths.
Holy.
Yeah. To their detriment. But on the other side of the equation, borderlines and codependents, people with dependent personality disorder, they are attracted to narcissists much more than to any other type. And the reason is that the narcissist idealizes. So the borderline is grandiose. She has a false self also. In borderline, we also have a false self. So the narcissist caters to the borderline's grandiosity, and he caters to the codependent's need to mother him and to be mothered. I call it the dual mothership principle. So that's why they are attracted to him. But he is indiscriminate. Indiscriminate. He would go with anyone.
You would go with anyone. And with that comes this thought of evil. How much evil those narcissists cause to the world. And if we can talk about the causes of evil in the world, how much those narcissists cause it?
Evil is a complicated problem. There's the issue of theodicy, how can we reconcile a benevolent God with the existence of evil, and so on and so forth. I wrote, by the way, a very long essay on theodicy. It's available on my website for those of you who are religiously inclined. There was a guy called Scott Peck. Scott Peck wrote the book People of the Lie.
Okay.
He suggested that narcissism is just a new name for what used to be called evil up until the 18th century, up until the Enlightenment. The Enlightenment got rid of the concepts of good and evil. The Enlightenment introduced relativism into the equation, and then we started to... Never mind. So, Scott Peck said, because I'm a philosopher by training, so we can veer off and you will never find me. So, Scott Peck said that narcissism is just another name for evil. I used to dispute this. For many, many years, I used to dispute Scott Peck and so on. But now that I'm older and hopefully a bit wiser, I think he had a pertinent point. I think a lot of the vocabulary of the Middle Ages has transitioned into psychiatry, and we just refuse to recognize it because psychiatry and psychology pretend to be a sciences. Psychology is not a science. It's a pseudoscience. Psychology is a form of art. It's a form of literature. The greatest psychologist to have ever lived was Fyodor Dostoevsky. And Freud was actually a great author and a very poor scientist. So psychology is a pseudoscience. Like every other pseudoscience, like the occult, we borrow a lot from the Middle Ages. And so psychology has in it concepts which can be mapped one-to-one to the Middle Ages. For example, possession and demons. We don't call it possession and demons anymore. We call it psychotic disorder or schizophrenia, paranoia. For example, hubris or vanity is a mortal sin. We call it narcissism. For example, evil, we call it cluster B personality disorder. So psychology is a continuation of medieval theology by other means, and with a pretension to objectivity and science. And this is what is known as scientism, imitation science, ersatz science.
But Sam, again, I would rephrase that question again. How much do you think it causes in the world? The narcissist itself, how much evil does it cause?
The vast majority of what we call evil is caused by people with cluster B personality disorders, borderlines, narcissists, and psychopaths. End of story.
Well, Sam, about the digital age, it's a great phenomenon that
About the what? I'm sorry?
The digital age. Okay.
Yes.
So we want to talk about it in the terms of narcissism. And I want to ask, do you think that social media was driven by narcissistic people, or how do you look at it in terms of narcissism in the social medias?
Well, social media was developed by people who were much more schizoid than narcissists. Loners, nerds, this kind of people.
Yes.
However, social media has very strong narcissistic elements. I would focus on two. Social media increasingly take you away from the world. They don't bring you into the world, but they take you away from reality. This is going to culminate with the Metaverse. The Metaverse is going to be an all-immersive, all-inclusive environment where you could basically do anything and everything. You could go to work in the Metaverse, you could do shopping in the Metaverse, you could pick up nice girls in the Metaverse and have sex with them. And all of it will be virtual in the Metaverse. You'll be wearing a haptic suit, so you will experience tactile input. They're even thinking of adding smells to the mixture. So the Metaverse is designed as a total substitute to reality, and it is the culmination of a trend of divorcing people from reality. This is one of the main determinants of narcissism. As we said in our previous conversation, narcissism is a failure to gauge reality properly and to accept the separateness and reality of other people. So in social media, people are commodified, they are digitized, they are objectified, they're not treated like real people. The second thing that all social media, without a single exception, do, they want you to be alone. Social media are enemies of intimacy, friendship, interconnectivity, community, collaboration, cooperation, and any other form of human interaction. The reason is very simple. If you have a girlfriend, you're going to dedicate time to her. You're going to pay her attention. This is attention that you're taking away from Facebook.
Attention economy.
Yes, it's an attention economy. Facebook monetizes, your eyeballs. Now, if your eyeballs are on your girlfriend, they are not on Facebook. And that affects Facebook's bottom line. These are profit-driven utilities, and I'm using the word utilities on purpose because they should have been regulated as utilities, as monopolies, as cartels, but no one dares, no politician dares to confront Facebook or Twitter or any of these platforms because they can be banned, they can be shadow banned and become invisible to the public, as they have tried to do to Donald Trump. Mm-hmm. So what's happening is, these platforms encourage you to be alone because intimacy, a relationship, reduces their profits. If you have an intimate relationship, if you have any kind of relationship, their profits go down. Additionally, lonely people consume a much higher proportion of their net income. That's an economic fact. So consumption is an engine here. In general, when you put together the money motive, the profit motive of social media, with the way the social media had been constructed, including by psychologists, you see that social media have three goals in mind. And mind, in this case, is the profit and loss statement. The first goal, take you away from reality and create for you such an alternative that would satisfy all your needs and reduce your incentive and motivation to go out into the world, to compromise, to negotiate, to sacrifice, and to somehow cope with other people. Goal number two, to make sure that you remain single and alone, not only single and alone, because then they can maximize your attention. And goal number three, to make sure that you have only negative emotions, never positive emotions. only negative emotions, because negative emotions, as we know, create much higher engagement. Negative emotions are extremely highly positively correlated with stickiness.
Mm-hmm.
So if you are angry, if you are envious, you are likely to revisit the page much more than if you are happy and loving.
Yes.
So they want you angry and envious. And envy is structured into the mechanism of social media through likes and relative positioning. So they want you to be jealous of other people, envious of other people all the time, and they give you visible indicators of how you stand in relation to others. This is a mechanism known as relative positioning. Now, how many likes do you have? How many views do you have? Etc., etc. YouTube, for example, removed recently the dislike feature. You see only the likes,
Yes.
not the dislikes. Dislikes are bad for business. Likes are good for business, because likes would cause you to compare yourself to others, your peers, and so you will strive to maximize likes.
And also you can use it as a form of manipulation, as for example, there was a YouTube Rewind, if you know what it is. It's where the most famous like influencers from YouTube are meeting and all that. And they're doing a beautiful video about what they did and giving messages there. So the dislike button was like in the millions. And afterwards, they said no more dislikes because we're trying to keep it positive out there. But
no, it's not positive. That is the common. They're gaslighting people.
Yes, that's exactly it.
Likes create negative emotions. We have numerous studies about this. This is an absolute lie. Likes on Facebook, likes on YouTube create negative emotions. They activate a mechanism known as relative positioning, and you compare yourself to others, peers, and then you feel bad. And that incentivizes you to escalate your behavior. So there's a lot of behavior escalation, trolling, and worse. Any discussion that starts on the internet deteriorates within minutes to insults, aggression, violence, attacks, threats. Why? Because of the way the platforms are structured, the incentive structure of the platform.
Yes, they're going with the process of radicalizing everything. And that means social movements as well as sexuality. And if there was the way to also go through there with ideology and bad ideology, they would do it as well. But it's not appealing to their interests, so they won't do it to the maximum.
They started to do it, but they were reined in by politicians and regulators. But they absolutely started to do it. But they were just discovered, unearthed. There were whistleblowers who blew the whistle on everything and so on. Another thing is, of course, you need to escalate to be noticed. You need to escalate to garner attention.
Yes.
So behaviors tend to escalate because the candy, the reinforcement is in the form of attention. So what these platforms do, they harvest attention from everyone. They harvest attention, and then they redistribute the attention to the users in a way that promotes escalatory radicalizing behavior.
Yes.
And this is not just an abstract French observation. This is exactly what they're doing. They take away your attention and they give it to someone. How do they decide to whom to give it? There's an algorithm. They take away your attention, and the algorithm dictates that your attention would be given to someone whose behavior is escalatory, whose behavior is radical, whose behavior is crazy, insane, rageful. So these people get much more attention than people who are positive and nice and happy.
Yes, in the social media is like the heads of it are playing dumb, like they don't know the algorithm and all that, but they are the ones who are making it. And we can see, for example, the women out there in the TikTok and Instagram, and we can see if you don't in Instagram upload a picture of your ass or titties, you will not get the same likes as you do. And that incentivizes a culture of just over-sexualization, I would say, and also undermining intimacy. I would like to think.
Any radical behavior, lack of intimacy is a radical behavior because we are built for intimacy. Any radical behavior, including, for example, conspiracy theories,
Yes,
misinformation, fake news, any radical behavior, antisocial behavior online, and so on, any radical behavior. Now, of course, the platforms are protected by the DMCA, the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, which exempts them from any editorial or other constraints, on the one hand. And on the other hand, they allow users to be anonymous. And anonymity is a great motivator for antisocial behavior. We have studies by Dana Ariely and others which demonstrated pretty conclusively that when you allow people to be anonymous, they misbehave badly.
yes.
When you don't supervise them. For example, when you leave the room and you leave them alone. And
Yes.
so whatever they're doing is anonymous. No
They
one
feel
is
like
observing
they
it.
have no consequences for their actions.
Yes. And so why do platforms not insist on identity verification? It's extremely easy.
Yes.
It's bullshit. It's 2 minutes, 2 seconds. Upload your passport. Upload your ID. Use your real name. Why they don't do this? Because they want negative emotions, negative reactions, extreme behaviors, radicalism. They want this. It is the bread and butter. It generates much more attention. What would people rather watch? A car crash or 2 pigeons kissing?
Car crash, of
course, by far.
Yes, it's like it's the thing like with good news and bad news. There is not a site for good news. There's only bad news.
But they are,
but they're not popular. They're not popular.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. And the platforms, what the platforms do, they are not only showing you the cars crashing, they're incentivizing you to crash your car.
For likes and views.
Yes, they're not neutral. The perception is that social platforms are neutral. Because they're neutral, they shouldn't be regulated, they shouldn't be penalized, they shouldn't be held responsible or accountable. That's nonsense. That's not true. There are several whistleblowers from Google and Facebook, including psychologists who participated in the design of the platforms. These testimonies are available online. Go and listen to them. These platforms were designed with malice, maliciously. They are malevolent. They are not benign.
But the question is, then, Sam, okay, we have Mr. Beast, who is the most popular YouTuber right now with 100-something million. Well, he's not sharing some bad things. He's like curing people, helping them, aiding them. Then what you're saying right now maybe not hold against what he does.
You can cure people and heal people in a variety of ways. For example, you can do it grandiosely.
Okay.
So that would cater to grandiosity and narcissism and so on. And I regret to say that the vast majority of public intellectuals, so-called healers, and so on and so forth, online are probably covert narcissists, in my estimate. So there's a lot of narcissistic interaction going on undercover. You remember our previous conversation? I told you about Mother Teresa,
yes,
and communal narcissists and activists and so on and so forth. Greta Thunberg. I have my suspicions as to her state of mind, and it's not benign what I'm thinking. So a lot of narcissism and psychopathy masquerades as good deeds. And of course, this is extreme radicalized behavior because it's ostentatious. It's like giving charity in public with the cameras clicking.
Yes. That's basically what he does.
Yes. So, I have my reservations. I think it's part of the radicalization and escalation of behavior.
Is that, we'll talk about this capitalism thing, that you can show a lot of money and all of that in the social age, and like that you can get recognized far more because of your actions and all of that. Do you think it's a form of manipulation that they are doing to some extent? The use of big money, like you say, grandiosely, in the social age, to show themselves as good people, but in themselves they're not. They're just doing, like you said, a facade.
Yeah, narcissists will do anything to obtain supply and to maintain a fantasy. But many of them don't even bother to pretend that they're good people. they just brag about their successes, their private jets, their limousines, the beautiful girls hanging on their arms, and so on and so forth. It's an envy economy. Social media is constructed on consumption of attention and distribution of envy. Envy is a great motivator. We even have studies by Twenge and Campbell and others that show that teenagers are inclined to commit suicide because of envy, because they can't compete. It's competition gone malignant. They can't compete, and so the rate of suicide among young people has increased dramatically since the moment the social media were introduced into their lives. The rate of depression has gone up 3 times. The rate of anxiety disorders 5 times, 500%. And the only difference, the only differential component, the only thing that changed was social media. The only thing that changed in these youngsters' lives was social media. So additionally, we are beginning to see antisocial and asocial behaviors. For example, the frequency of sex has deteriorated among young people.
Yes, for men, it's like 28% or something along those lines between the ages of 18 and 30. And for women at the same ages, it's like 17%. But it's like going up all the time. And that's only the test we have from 2018. We don't know after COVID how much this percent went up. That's interesting.
But all in all, the frequency of sex has collapsed by 30% since the 80s.
Wow.
So we have a generation that is far less sexually active. But not only sexually active, socializes far less, engages in adult behaviors far less. For example, 35% of people under age 35, it's easy to remember, 35 under 35, still live with their parents. They still live with their parents. And that is a global phenomenon from Italy to the United States, all over the world. People today get a driving license 2.5 years later than the previous generations, and so on and so forth. So people refuse to grow up. Social media, because it divorces you from reality, also divorces you from the pressures to grow up. Reality forces you to grow up. So there is a general retardation, a general lack of maturity in the population that is also attributed to a large extent to social media. And I'm very worried where social media is going. Very worried, because the metaverse is absolutely a dystopian nightmare. Absolutely dystopian, in my view. And no one seems to be stopping it. Regulators don't intervene. If it's coupled with AI, the result could be horrible.
And at least in this world, we have a so-called God that controls us and our behaviors, and we have all of that, the morals. But in this world, humans will control it. And that's a recipe for maybe disaster, because we don't know what they will do with us. We know that power corrupts. We know all of that. So yes, it's scary.
And it's not regulated. That's the problem, because politicians don't really dare to go there. They can be blacklisted and vanish, simply vanish.
Yes.
Today people consume news 56% through Facebook.
Wow.
Facebook is 3.5 times bigger than all the major networks, including CNN, combined.
Ooh.
So if Facebook blacklists you, you're gone, you're dead, you don't exist anymore. Now, until now, there was a competition on eyeballs and attention between the tech giants. The metaverse means that the tech giants will try to control reality. So the new resource is not attention. The new resource is reality. They will try to construct realities, alternative realities, virtual realities.
Yes.
And this would be your reality, because you wake up in the morning, you put up the goggles or the haptic suit, maybe you will sleep in your haptic suit if you had sex, and that will be your world. So now the new resources to be mined is not Bitcoin, and it's not eyeballs, it's reality. They're mining reality. And you're right that while Bitcoin is a distributed ledger, and so no one is in control, and even social media are still sufficiently distributed, so big groups of users can alter the behavior of social media. The metaverse will be centrally controlled, possibly by one person. And that's really terrifying.
Yes, because he will see himself as this godlike person.
God, yeah. He will be God because he will be the creator of worlds. That's how the Veda opens, He will be Vishnu, the creator of worlds.
Yo, that thought is so interesting. And okay, let's go a bit like to the start of this conversation where you talked about kids and they use the things they use in social media, like the TikToks and Instagrams and all of that, and because of it they have more mental illnesses and all of that. How can you as a parent control that your child will not be on social medias, or like tell them or show them that it's not healthy? How to control them, you think?
You can limit usage, let's say to 2 hours a day, but kids will find their way around it. I think the genie is out of the bottle.
You're thinking pessimistically entirely. There is no way back.
Totally. Look at the last 20 years. Have I been wrong? I mean, would I have been wrong had I been pessimistic?
No.
I mean, the last 20 years are from bad to worse and from worse to worse. I don't see any improvement in any field or area or whatever. So I think I'm realistic. I'm not pessimistic. I think technology shapes consciousness the same way reality shaped consciousness in the past.
Yeah.
And in this sense, technology is a new religion, because we had a period in human history where what could easily be described as a fantasy, there is God and there is heaven and there is this and there is that, what could easily be a fantasy controlled our consciousness, determined it, and the content of our consciousness. And then we got rid of the fantasy. We had the age of enlightenment, where we engage with reality without the interface of a fantasy. And then after 200-300 years, we are very disappointed. We are not happy. It sucks. And we said the hell with it. Fantasy was much better. And you have figures like Jordan Peterson who are actually saying this. They're saying the past was much better because we had a fantasy. The fantasy of God, the fantasy of values, of family, So they are strong public advocates of getting rid of the reality principle, to use Freud's term, and adopting the fantasy principle. The problem is this: the fantasies of the past were intimately coupled with pro-social values and beliefs. The fantasies of the future, starting with the metaverse, and don't believe the metaverse will be the last step, holographic techniques, metaverse, in artificial intelligence, maybe chips in your brain. I don't
Neuralink,
know
like Musk wants.
Yes, I don't know where it's going to end. So the fantasies of the future are all constructed around profits, are all constructed around power, encourage escalation and negativity, encourage loneliness and lack of intimacy, have no values and no identity. The fantasies of the future are not like the fantasies of the past. So while we can say our experiment with reality between the 18th and the 21st century failed, it led us to bad places, it led us to the Holocaust, it led us to nuclear bombs. It sucks. We should get rid of it. We should go back to a fantasy. We're not going back to a fantasy. We're going forward to very, very dangerous and threatening fantasies.
So we have basically two things here. We're going from evolutionary to revolutionary, but this revolutionary is not healthy for us as human beings. And you said about...
Reactionary, I would say reactionary, not revolutionary.
Reactionary.
We're going back to a fantasy principle. Listen, the first metaverse was the city. A city is an artificial creation. Mm-hmm. Totally artificial. It's virtual reality. A city is virtual reality. So we had already experimented with a fantasy of this kind. Religion is a fantasy defense. So most of mankind's existence was in fantasy. So we are going back to the principle of fantasy. That's reactionary. But because of technology, the content of our fantasies is such that they cannot be axiological. They cannot contain values. The only value is profit. So they cannot contain values. So you cannot couple the fantasy with prescriptive norms of behavior.
Yes.
Or proscriptive norms of behavior. In other words, the fantasy will not be able to tell you, don't do this or do this, and reward you or incentivize you to behave properly or socially. These fantasies are open-ended, they're neutral, they are totally phenomenological, they're objective. They are not normative fantasies. And this is the danger. Because if you find yourself embedded in a fantasy that has no values, and no norms, and no conventions, and no mores, and no prescriptions, and no proscriptions, nothing to guide you, then you're lost. And when people are lost, they do horrible things to each other.
Yes, and that's where Nietzsche comes into play. And we talk about the madman, where he comes and says, God is dead, we have killed him. And more than that, he says his shadow will be there and staying for thousands of years. And people forget that fact, that if we will try to do it, God will stay in a certain way within us. So trying to forget about that fact is ludicrous in some extent.
God? Well, I'm not religious, of course, and I believe that God is a fantasy. But,
yeah, me as well, and to some extent.
But the God principle, should we say?
The God principle, yes.
Everything will be corrupted. I think this is something that maybe I've not made clear. Everything inside you will be corrupted. Fantasy is a all-pervasive defense mechanism. It means it consumes you. You get immersed in it. So if you have a God principle inside you, this God principle will be corrupted by the fantasy as well.
Wow.
You will leverage it to do bad things and to justify yourself with your internal God. The fantasy corrupts. That's why all historical fantasies, like religion or like nation state, nationhood is also fantasy. It's a totally counterfactual invention. What the hell is a nation? There's no such thing as a nation, as a race. It's all nonsense. But it's a fantasy. So in the 19th century, we had the fantasy of nation states. But look what happened with Narcissism.
Yes.
When you have a fantasy that leverages values and principles in the wrong way, you end up with horrors.
A lot of people killed.
Yes. So this is my fear. The new fantasies, the new cluster of fantasy, the new generation of fantasy, they are norm-free. They have no values. They're open to anything. You know, everything is possible, no problem. Everything is equal to everything. Everyone is equal to everyone. There's no hierarchy in any sense, normative or intellectual or whatever. And so all goes. Everything goes. Everything goes. Wait a minute. If everything goes, I'm going to use all my assets. And if one of my assets is my inner God, or a God voice, or a God principle, I'm going to use it in the fantasy. And I'm going to abuse it in the fantasy. The same way the nation state was abused by Hitler, the same way religion was abused by the Crusaders, and so on and so forth. Everything can be corrupted and will be corrupted given the wrong fantasy. Fantasy is an organizing principle of the human mind and of human lives. We need to be very careful what we are doing with fantasies. Very careful. Had you spoken to Germans in the 1930s, they would have told you that they are moral people, moral beings, ethical. They're doing the right thing. They're saving humanity from the contagion known as the Jews, because they were embedded in Hitler's fantasy.
Yes, his story.
So fantasy is not something we should play. It's as dangerous as artificial intelligence. It's not something we should play with recklessly, you know? And we're doing this.
But the question is, okay, we're going to the artificial intelligence thingy, and we're saying, okay, then we will supply everything that you need as a human being, sex and all that, via artificial intelligence. How do you look about it? Like relationships right now will be maybe with artificial intelligence. What do you think?
Artificial intelligence is an entity. It is silicon-based today, maybe titanium-based in the future or whatever, but it's still an entity. It's an entity with, I think, pretty shortly, in 10 years' time, it will be an entity with its mind, with a mind, sentient and intelligent and self-aware and so on. In due time, in 50 years, in 100 years, there will be no meaningful distinction between you and Moshe's 7.0, who will be an artificial intelligence entity. Yeah? And so I think our fear of artificial intelligence is, in this sense, misplaced, because they will come to resemble us. In due time, they will become very human-like, android, and they will be, the relationship will be like the relationship between Neanderthals and the Cro-Magnon.
Ah.
We're inventing a new humanoid species.
Yes.
Ultimately, we're inventing a new humanoid species based on different elements, like silicon, and we are teaching this. We are raising this species by teaching this species to think and to be self-aware and to write poetry and to answer questions wrongly, by the way, via chat
GPT, for example.
GPT, and so on. So, but it'll take time, and in 100 years, there will be silicon-based people and carbon-based people, and the distinction would be laughable. I mean, no one will ask you, are you silicon-based? Meaningless. So that doesn't bother me in the least. What does bother me is that this can be leveraged or integrated in a fantasy that is value-free, a fantasy where everything goes, a fantasy that is morally relativistic to the point that there's no morality, a fantasy that doesn't tell you how to behave appropriately, is not prescriptive. Fantasy who doesn't tell you that some of the things you're doing are wrong, because there will be no right and wrong, no good and evil, there will be nothing. It's a fantasy after all. The defense would be, it's not real. That would be the defense. And then mass atrocities will be committed within the metaverse, and they will have real life consequences, because millions of teenagers will commit suicide, for example. And psychopaths will leverage this fantasy to steal money from pensioners. And I can think of a million other. Already we have instances of rape in the VR chat rooms. We already have instances of sexual assault and rape. It's nothing yet. I mean, it's just an avatar. Now imagine when your whole body will be there through integrated haptic suits, and I mean,
your full attention will be a real experience
of rape.
Yeah.
It will be real rape, but happening in a fantasy. So we need to introduce ethical guidelines now. We need even to legislate. We need to say no one will have a license for a multiverse unless they conform to a code of ethics, which is formulated and so on. But we are not even beginning to go there.
Yes, how can you do it? Because social medias, like you've said, are such a powerful entities. They are bigger than countries in terms of their wealth and also in terms of their influence. And the question comes, okay, we know politicians are doing the same things over and over again to maybe appeal to their interests, maybe to stay in the throne. We don't know. Can we trust them to do that? I don't know. I don't think so.
We can't trust politicians to do that because they're compromised by social media. Politicians need exposure. They need to be in the news. Social media control exposure and the news. So of course, politicians are in the pocket of social media. They stage mock interrogations in Congress, but it's bullshit.
Yes.
The only way to rein in the next generation of social media, which is immersive, solipsistic, anti-real, unreal, anti-reality, and value-free, the only way is a grassroots movement similar to the environmental movement. It's the only way. When people realize the dangers in the next generation of social media coupled with artificial intelligence, maybe there will be a grassroots groundswell of resistance, and then money talks, consumers talk, and they can dictate a code of ethics. For example, by walking off or walking away from certain platforms, and these platforms will be the havens of psychopaths and narcissists. Normal, healthy people will avoid these platforms because they don't have a code of ethics,
Okay. I understand, but there is the Great Reset as well that says like you will own nothing and you will live happy like you never lived before. And we have also Yuval Noah Harari, who says that those people who are not the smartest, who cannot contribute to society, for example, will be on drugs and will be on computers. And I'm asking, okay, we need the change, because if we'll go to where we said we were going to go, it will be catastrophic. And I'm asking you, Sam, like, okay, if we will go to Marx and we will be revolutionary and we'll take our ideologies and not be only philosophers, but also execute what we say, is that a solution by your eyes?
No, it cannot be through any central authority, intellectual or political. This must be a grassroots movement, because the only currency, the only language these platforms understand are the language of money.
Yes.
So if you boycott or cancel a platform, that is going to hurt. And it's going to hurt where it hurts, in the wallet. And they're going to modify their behavior. So if you have a metaverse without a code of ethics or without a set of values, and if you have a metaverse with a code of ethics and a set of values, you need to educate people that the first metaverse without values is very dangerous, because it will be the hunting ground for psychopaths and narcissists. And the second one is safe. And then people will gravitate to the safe option. And a small minority of wackos and criminals and I don't know what, they will go to the valueless option. Okay. Let them have a psychopath paradise or a narcissist haven.
Yeah.
No problem. But at least they will be isolated, identifiable, and by the way, subject to law enforcement. It will make it much easier for law enforcement. But it needs to be grassroots. There is no single intellectual or political authority that can impose its will on social media. None. Or high tech more generally, not only social media. Consider, for example, the introduction of artificial intelligence into search engines.
Yes.
What does it do? It removes pluralism. It removes diversity. It homogenizes and monopolizes the answer. What is the answer?
It's an agenda.
Reality. It's about reality. I keep telling you, they're mining reality.
Yeah.
So now if you go to Bing chat and you ask, who is Sam Vaknin? You don't get 100 links, some of which are very bad, by the way. You don't get 100 links. You get a single answer. This single answer is your only reality.
Yeah.
This is a way to monopolize reality, because the vast majority of people are lazy. They will not go beyond the single answer. And I can tell you, as an experienced user, I found it very difficult to find out how to go from a single answer to multiple answers. They don't make it easy. They want you to consume the single answer. I went to Bing Chat and I asked a series of questions about myself, of course. Who else? 80% of the answers were wrong. 80. I asked, what year did I marry my wife? 1997. Wrong. Wrong, for example. 80% of the answers were wrong.
But that's others' perceptions and reality for them.
But for them, it would be the only truth. They would say, or actually one of them did say, someone sent me kind of a screenshot.
Okay.
Said, you see, this chat engine says you're not a professor. Luckily, Bing Chat gets it right. So if you ask, is Sam Vaknin a professor? It says yes. Luckily for me. But there's another obscure, I forgot the name, AI engine.
Yeah.
That says I'm not a professor. And this person didn't bother to go to Bing or to Google, but it was the Bible. That's it. That's the answer. It's the only reality. there is a competition to monopolize reality between the high-tech companies, the high-tech giants. Reality is the new terra incognita, and they're going to colonize reality. It's a colonial movement. Reality is the new real estate. And they are now colonizing it, mining it, exploiting the local natives. I mean, exactly like colonialism in the 19th century. And to do that, they use artificial intelligence and a new generation of fantasies, which are going to be so permissive and so open that they will never create objections anywhere.
So do you think the democratization of knowledge, so-called, that I am the stupid 19-year-old, can go and spread information online, is it a good thing or a bad thing? Because first of all, it brings pluralism, like you said, but secondly, it may bring misinformation. So you, like you said in one of your interviews, it's like a tsunami of information. So maybe that pluralism also is not that good of a solution.
Of course, but providing a single answer is definitely the worst conceivable solution. You need to rank websites according to credibility, institutional support, reliability, etc., etc. So you can't have a 19-year-old's website equal, for example, to the Britannica.
Yes.
You need to rank.
Yes.
This is being done, more or less. But now with the introduction of AI, you are excluded from all this. And all you get is a single answer.
It's like a religion.
It's a single answer. It's a creed. Yeah, exactly. You're a heretic if you ask for more. I couldn't find how to find more. It was all over Bing trying to, how can I get additional answers? Finally, I succeeded, but it took me like 5 minutes. So there's a single answer there. And I asked 10 questions, eight of the answers were wrong. Factually wrong. Forget about opinions, values, judgments.
Yeah.
Factually wrong. The facts were wrong. And by the way, the facts are freely available, for example, on Wikipedia.
Yeah, so it's easy access. But I'm asking, okay, then let's go to the internet and let's have people edit all those stuff. There will be also, again, agenda. It's a search engine. And power will come. And like it came to the science, money will come. And then, not the truth will prevail, but the interests of people. And that's where the internet is there at this stage. It's a problem.
Any utility that is not subject to regulation is bound to get corrupted and dangerous. I was amongst the earliest proponents of regulating the internet. I know it's not a popular opinion, but we are seeing the consequences now with the tsunami of fake news and misinformation and so on.
Yes.
You can't get reliable answers on the internet anymore, I know, because I've been doing it for 25 years. You can't really get reliable answers anymore. You need to work really hard to compare multiple sources and so on, and to form your own opinion finally. Even then, it's just an opinion. You can't rely on the internet. So, yes, it's co-opted and so on. But had there been some regulatory oversight and monetary incentives, for example, fines and penalties, trust me, high-tech companies would have found within minutes ways to provide you with credible information that is verified and so on. Minutes.
But Sam, also a problem. We cannot trust anybody in this age, basically. Whatever it's the government, whatever it's those high-tech companies, we don't trust anybody. So it's also, in the eyes of the people, not a proper solution to this big old problem, I would like to think.
It's a problem of malignant egalitarianism. People think that everyone is equal to everyone. It's not true. There's a hierarchy. I agree with Jordan Peterson. There's a hierarchy. People with academic degrees know more than people without academic degrees. The Britannica is a much better source than Wikipedia. Citizendium is much better source than Wikipedia, etc., etc., etc. This hierarchy should be at the core of search results. And similarly, there's a hierarchy of values. For example, the values of Nazism are lower on the hierarchy than the values of the Old Testament or the New Testament. I think vast majority of population would agree, except a few neo-Nazis. So we need to create hierarchies and integrate them. They're called axiological hierarchies. We need to create axiological and, by the way, taxonomic hierarchies and integrate them in technology. And we are not doing this today. We are going exactly the opposite way. And the opposite way is everyone is equal to everyone. You're not supposed to offend anyone. Opinion is as good as truth, and there is no truth. And there are no facts. And you can't trust experts, and you can't trust experts, and you can't trust professionals. They are corrupted by money, they are lying, and so on. And so
COVID was the best example for it.
COVID was the best example. So it's a disaster waiting to happen because we're like a flock without a shepherd. We need shepherds. We need what used to be called gatekeepers. You couldn't publish anything without an editor in the past. I know because I published books and I needed to go through editors.
Yeah.
You couldn't, but today you can. So there is a problem of discoverability. You go on Amazon on a typical year, anywhere between 1 million and 3 million so-called books are published. How will you find my book? My book is one of the best on the topic of narcissism. But how on earth are you going to find it when every year there's 5,000 books on narcissism published? And how will you know that it's one of the best? Maybe I'm lying.
Yeah.
There's a problem of discoverability. We are drowning in trash, intellectual trash and so on. I witnessed a conversation, a chat on a forum.
Okay.
One guy said, the Battle of Hastings occurred in 1066. And another guy said, no, I think you're wrong, it was 1086. So the first guy posted a snippet from Britannica, from the Britannica.
Yeah.
Or was it Wikipedia? No, I think it was Britannica. And then the second guy said, well, that's the Britannica's opinion. My opinion is that it happened in 1086.
There is no end to it.
One of the most shocking conversations I ever read in my life.
So it's a problem, like to have a conversation right now between those two ideologies as well. If we will say the left and the right, nobody, at least the left, I think, maybe I'm wrong, disagrees more to have a conversations with the right. So we can even go to proper solutions on those problems because one side thinks he's the smartest and knows all, and the other side says his reality is the only right reality. And like that, it dismisses the other side. So where can we find a solution?
No, he actually didn't say that his reality is the only reality.
I'm saying...
He said, my reality is as legitimate as your reality and as legitimate as Britannica. We are all equal. I call it malignant egalitarianism. We're all equal. It's not that I'm more equal, but like we're all equal. My opinion, Britannica's opinion, your opinion, it's opinion. It's just opinion.
So with that, how can we go and just understand and go as a community together and take the root of the problem and just have a solution for it if we cannot even have a proper community with us? And if the proper community we have it, we cannot merge it into physical identities and have with them something that will do a better change for humanity.
Problem is identity politics. Campbell, who is a sociologist, said that we transitioned from the age of dignity to the age of victimhood. And identity politics has a lot to do with victimhood. Even that person who was arguing with the Britannica, he felt like a victim of the intellectual establishment. He was a rebel. It was an act of rebellion, you know? He was not just arguing with the Britannica. He was arguing with the whole Western tradition of academics, professors, experts. He was showing the middle finger to academic institutions and to professors and to experts and scholars. He was telling them, I'm as good as you. There is a divorce between elites and the people. There's hatred between the elites and the people. All elites, medical elites, intellectual elites, I mean, you name it.
Yeah.
And there are mediators known as public intellectuals. They're trying to bridge the gap, but ultimately they also become demagogues and they support the people against the elites. They start off as a bridge and they end up on the side of the people against the elite because it pays. If you're on the side of the people, you make a hell of a lot more money.
Yeah.
It's very difficult. I made a video online saying that people who refuse to receive COVID vaccines are probably psychopathic and narcissistic. You should have seen what happened to me. I lost half my subscribers and half my income. I was severely penalized for saying this.
Wow.
Yet, this is the obligation of an intellectual, a true intellectual. That's my obligation, to say the truth as I see it and back it up with facts as I can find. It's my obligation. Intellectuals betrayed their obligation because they also succumbed to money. Money corrupted everything. You keep pushing me for solutions. I don't know. I am not convinced there are solutions. You see, sometimes the only solution is total devastation, post-apocalypse.
Yeah.
Schumpeter, who was an economist, called it creative destruction.
And on Earth.
We need to go through a phase of destruction in order to rebuild, because the structure we have constructed over the last 300-400 years is not going to stand. And there's no point in renovating it and painting it and, I don't know, calling the plumbers. And we just need to destroy the bloody thing and start from scratch.
Maybe.
And I think we are well on the way.
Maybe.
I think we are well on the way.
Okay, let's go again to the
another 5 minutes because I have clients and so on.
No problem, no problem. So, one quick question about relationships in the digital age. In terms of that, because we have a tendency to see a lot of the people just picturing themselves, and let's just go to the women, they're leaving the sexual photos, for example, on Instagram, but they're going to relationships. So it's some sort of, I cannot explain it, but a different dynamic of relationship, because you're not living in the past, you're letting people just see it. Meanwhile, you're in a new era, in a new life. So do you see it as a problem?
Relationships in the age of social media, in postmodern society, relationships are performative. It's a performance. It's a performance to the benefit of other people. So you perform your relationship in front of friends, social media, fans, subscribers, followers. It's all a performance. That's the first element, which is very destructive to a relationship, because you dedicate all your energy and emotions and everything to the performance, not to the relationship. And you expect your partner to collaborate in the performance. And if he doesn't, you're very angry.
Yeah.
And the second thing, we regard each other as objects and commodities. We consume each other. Yeah. So it's a consumption thing. You consume your partner. The financial benefits your partner can give you, his status in society, the way he looks. You advertise his looks or his brain or whatever. So we regard other people as objects to be consumed. And it's a very selfish and self-interested view. And then when they agree to team up with us, we construct a theater play or a movie, which is very narcissistic. Again, modern relationships are a fantasy space. Fantasy space. That's why people, when they break up, are very furious and angry and hateful and resentful and try to take revenge and so on. Because it's not reality they have lost. It's the dream. It's a dreamscape. Modern relationships are dreamscapes. People no longer live in reality, because reality is tough. Reality is hard.
Yeah.
Reality requires hard work and compromises, and it sucks most of the time.
Yeah.
Reality really sucks. But fantasy, a dream. Who wants to wake up from a dream? And if your partner forces you to wake up from a dream, you hate his guts and you want him dead. So that's why people break up in a very bad way today, acrimoniously. I think we have exhausted the subject ourselves and our viewers.
So thank you, first of all.
What's left of them? Yeah.
Well, first of all, thank you, Sam. You're an incredible guest, and also you have an incredible channel, so please follow him on YouTube, Sam Vaknin. You will have also the link in the description below. Thank you very much for your time, sir.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Oh, great. Thank you very much, Sam. I appreciate that.